There were a couple other things that came to mind when I was shooting this video, or the past video that I just am in the process of uploading about Autecher and the significance of the band and their last two studio albums that I wanted to get to. So I'm making a little bit of a shorter video to kind of talk about it. But years ago, there used to be this really awesome venue in Rockland, Maine, called Fog Bar and Grill, and it was such an awesome place. I really, really missed that place. It took me a while to kind of just let it go. It was a place like a billion other places that closed and never was able to reopen due to because of COVID. They did, you know, basically what it was and how I started playing there at Fog Bar and Grill. I kind of wanted to talk about that place and specific conversations or a group of different conversations I had about music and about Altecker and how I think of them and how I view them. So many was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I used to be in this band called the 220s, which was like a rock band here that played in Midcoast, Maine, and we started off as a band where we were like a cover band, basically a rock and roll cover band, and we played a lot of like classic rock tunes. And from the beginning of our first few gigs, there was like I don't know, like a spark, a creative spark that was going on that felt like, there's something significant here. There's something special about the band, like the chemistry. And people seem to really like the band at that point. From an early point or an early stage, people seem to like the band and were into it and pretty supportive. And we played a lot of local for a while. We played a lot of local gigs here in in the mid coast and stuff. And the band eventually changed quite a bit, and also moved into we got to a place where the band was getting very, very successful, and we kind of moved into a place of we were doing more original music, and it kind of morphed and shifted. But during the early time of the band, when we started out as a four piece and then we eventually became a trio, during that phase, we were still mostly doing covers. We were starting to introduce some original material and what have you. But I remember it was kind of a chance gig. But we had a gig where we were playing in Rockland, and it was at there used to be a music store in town called Northern Kingdom Music, which was a really great music shop, and they used to sponsor these concerts during the summer where they would basically they had a budget. They would pay these bands to perform on the street in Rockland, and it was kind of an odd thing too. But they would set the bands up at Key Bank out in the front, and it was right on Main Street. And they would give you the power, and you would get paid to play there for a couple hours to do a short set. And they were basically doing this through that summer. And again, this was like probably 8, 9 years ago now, which is crazy. And we ended up getting one of those dates, one of those gigs, and so we ended up playing there and had a pretty good show, and it was kind of fun. But across the street was Fog Bar, and they had just kind of opened, I think maybe a year or so. It was still a real new business, and it was just kind of a high end restaurant pub kind of a place, a really cool spot. But Ashley Sealake, who was the owner, I noticed she was watching us and really, liked the band, and so she asked us about if we would want to play a gig at Fog, and she's like, "You should guys should come over after your show and come over, and I'll buy you guys dinner, and we can talk about maybe setting something up. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. So after we got done playing, we all went over there, and she bought us drinks, she bought us dinner, and we talked about booking some shows, and it went really well, and it was super fun. It was our first time. It was my first time ever going there, and for whatever reason, we were never able to book a date or nothing schedule wise. I never ever worked, but I kept in touch with Ashley, and at that time they started doing an open mic and all of these things. And fast forward, after some time, I started to go to the open mic. I started playing, and then I had a friend who used to play drums for it. He got burnt out of it and stopped, and then asked if I wanted to take over. So I took over, and I started playing drums at the open mic, and I did it for about 3 years or so, and it was super fun. I met a lot of cool people through that, and it was every like Monday night, and kind of got into a good space with the owners, and had this. And then fast forward a couple of years after that, I started my band Quantum, and we started playing there quite a bit, and we started playing there. We played a lot of gigs there, and it was super awesome. We had a regular residency there for about 2 or 3 years. We were playing there like twice a month sometimes, and it was one of the best. It was the best thing for us as a band to do, because we really felt like we had to really, you know, there were good shows and bad shows, but we really developed the sound. We really developed our band, and it was great. And I remember during that time, one of my great friends and one of the people I respect the most when it comes to just music and art is Tom Luther, who is an amazing local musician who teaches at Midcoast Music Academy and an amazing piano player. He does some incredible electronic music. I mean, the list is endless of his accomplishments. I really admire him. I look up to him, but I remember there was one time where he was over at the open mic. And we were hanging out, talking, having some beers or whatever. And we were talking about music. And I told him about Autecher. And he, I think at the time, I kind of got introduced that band to him, and he really loved them. And he bought a couple of their records, and we were talking about, like, I don't know, like music and culture, and like, when generations or kind of like the generational um, thing around certain artists, and throughout the decades. And we were talking about like, say, music that to a degree represents, like, I don't know, a generation, or like music that you have this idea sometimes in culture and music and art where there's like a voice that speaks for the youth, like, you know um, like Miles Davis. I kind of look at what he did through his amazing career. Like, he spoke for like this new generation of jazz fans, or lovers, but then also was kind of this voice for change, and to push music forward, um, and and I think even like bands like, say, like Nirvana, like that ushered in. He was kind of a voice of this new generation to a degree, and then obviously Bob Dylan, a huge culturally big significant voice. Woody Guthrie, where there's and it's not always the thing where the artist is really wanting to be that voice. I think in the case of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, like, he was really conflicted, didn't really want to be that person to be the voice of a generation. And I think Bob Dylan, to a degree too, he kind of distanced himself from this idea that a lot of people who were part of the 60s movement as far as bringing in social change. A lot of people adapted or thought of him as I don't know if a poster child is too much, but that he was this voice for a new political movement or mindset. And he kind of, for the most part, from what I've read, he was kind of, he was um, outspoken about certain things, but I think, he really, over time, didn't want to be used as some kind of political thing. He kind of distanced himself from that. I've seen interviews of where he wasn't really comfortable with being used as this, necessarily a voice for a political movement per se. Um, so there's always conflicts around that within itself, I think. But I think what like Woody Guthrie was a voice, and he was very much about that. Um, Unions and things like that. But anyway, it's pretty safe to say, I was making this analogy where I felt like when we were talking about electronic music, and in particular Autecher, I felt like my thing that I was saying was I felt like Autecher is like the voice of this new digital age. To me, it's the soundtrack to this new digital age, this new kind of dystopian world that we live in. And this was like a discussion that we had before things got to where we are now, which is significantly worse. So, but at that time, it was, I felt they are that voice for, this digital age uh, that we live in, this modern contemporary society. If anybody's going to be that, it would be them. That, for at least for me, like they have that cultural significance. And I was saying, well, like as much as I love Bob Dylan and I have deep respect for those artists, or for him as an artist, and I love his music, I felt like he spoke for a different generation, and culturally it didn't have that significance now, because I felt like Altecker represented this new kind of futurist, technology driven society, with this very kind of dystopian reality. Like for me, it was the perfect soundtrack. Whereas Bob Dylan was more or less looked at as a voice of the youth and change during the '60s. And for me, that's how highly I regard Autecher, and that's how I look at them. Even though they're obviously not a household name, not even close to like what Bob Dylan was, I think culturally, that's how I look at them. Like they represent those, the trials and tribulations of being alive in this modern digital age. So I want to do a little follow up video about that. But anyway, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.